Well, we're pleased to welcome Joe Spinelli back to the studio to talk a little bit more about the Kroll Ethisphere Anti-Bribery and Corruption Benchmarking Report. So, Joe, let's talk about Section 3, monitoring the evolving role of compliance post-onboarding. And I think it was 3 years ago that the Kroll report was with Compliance Week, and one of the leaders at Kroll talked about the perils of vetting and forgetting. So let's talk about that. Let me tell you a little story first. So when I was in the field, I'm working with an agent in South America. No indication of corruption or corrupt intent. Joe, one day he gives me a call, and he said, "Look, Richard," and by the way, this call was monitored by federal law enforcement, all right? And he says, "Things have been slow around here, but we just had a change in government. We've got a new president, which means a new minister of Interior and a new minister of Defense." Those were my customers. "And they're going to put all new people in procurement." And he said, "Richard, those are my buddies." And quote unquote, they know they only have a few years to make their pension. So here's a case where regime change totally shifted where that third party was, for lack of a better term, on the continuum of corruption. So Joe, is this still, 3 years later, this peril of vetting and forgetting, is it something that companies aren't truly appreciating?
I think I'm seeing more sensitivity for the need to do it.
Okay.
I think the term interval monitoring has become very familiar with most organizations. They understand that one and done doesn't cut it.
Right.
You can today feel very good about a third party, and justifiably so, but 6 months from now, that third party may become a foreign official. He may have an association with a government official that could get you into trouble. His whole status may have changed. He may have been terminated, you don't even know, from an organization that you continue to do business with. He may be in a financial situation that didn't exist when you were first vetting him. So, the interval monitoring component is so critical. And by the way, every conference I've gone to, every panel I've been on with officials from the Department of Justice, it's across the board. The expectation now is, if you think that you've done it once and it's enough, you're wrong.
Right.
The expectation is they expect you to continuously monitor your third parties. Some say, annually. Now I'm hearing even every 6 months. It depends on who you speak to, I guess.
Right.
But no matter whether it's 6 months or a year, you better be conducting continuous due diligence on those third parties.
So, this is a subject that I find fascinating, where companies, even with the best intentioned and robust due diligence process, I call it, you let that third party into your circle of trust, then you move on. It's a natural part of business. Then you're worried about your next deal. So, Joe, what are the ways that a company can think about interval monitoring? You've listed all these different variables that should trigger it. Joe, who triggers it?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is assign responsibility to an individual internally. Usually someone on the compliance committee, if not the chief compliance officer, him or herself, would have that direct responsibility. But that's nice. But there's also responsibility comes accountability, and my feeling is there has to be the board involvement also with this. And what I mean by that is when you're doing the interval monitoring and you're coming up with the current due diligence reports, they have to be elevated to the board as well as the general counsel, and they are the ones who should take a very hard and long look at whether or not there's been any change in status of that third party. Because I will tell you, and I've seen it firsthand, it doesn't take a whole lot for individuals who get comfortable in a particular company as a third party to feel that they have a little bit more liberty to do whatever they want to do and associate with whomever they want to associate, and to cut side business deals if it's more lucrative. So your story about the change of the hierarchy of an organization, is very typical of what I'm talking about here. And by the way, you could take this to mergers and acquisitions and companies that are being acquired every day now. I'm seeing, more than ever before, as a prerequisite to consummating that deal, I want to see what kind of a FCPA compliance program you have. I want to see what kind of due diligence, third-party due diligence you conducted, because I don't want to assume liability here.
Right.
It's just that simple. So, I'm very much encouraged by what I see as far as people becoming far more aware of not only what the expectations are, but I like the idea of the fact that people, they want to do the right thing, and now I believe they're armed with enough information to do the right thing.
Okay.
And it's not exactly where we all want it to be yet, but I think it's headed in the right direction.
So let me press you on that a little bit.
Sure.
So we've got the board, we've got, let's call it the compliance suite, but at the end of the day, it's that end user and that intermediary in South America that had this event that triggered the change. Now, back at HQ, they may not know that. So who do you think should be responsible for and empowered to flag that up? How does that happen?
Well, in a location where that third party is actually performing business and conducting business, there should be some oversight, and, some company oversight.
Sure.
All right, so let's say Mr. X is in South Africa, and he's in Cape Town, and the individual's doing business there. Obviously, I'm in New York where the headquarters are. What do I know what he's doing?
Right.
Okay. Well, Mr. X better be very well versed in what anti-bribery and corruption is all about. More importantly, he better have some type of resources that can oversee the expenditures, oversee the contractual arrangement, oversee, who's authorizing payments, and basically be able to ensure that the internal controls that should exist and are basically his responsibility to effectuate are actually being done so in a very effective way. So it takes, I think, time to train people, and I hear this all the time. Well, they got to come in from all over the world. My sales managers are coming in from 5, 6, 10 different countries. We're losing business as they do it. Yeah, that's true, but that's the type of investment you have to make if you want to avoid the type of fines and reputational damage that could exist if you don't do it.
Right.
It's just that simple, so you pay now or you pay later, but you pay a very costly price when the reputational damage is done.
Yeah.
You mentioned certain companies by name. Any one company by name that's been exposed to the type of draconic fines that we're talking about, and that stays with them forever.
Right.
No matter what they do, no matter how great their compliance program is today,
That's what the brand
that's what
starts,
you remember. And that's unfortunate.
And I would even say, Joe, that for companies that have the Richard Bistrongs in the field, they need to feel like if you have something like that happens, there's a risk that you bring that to us. We might discontinue what's been a very successful relationship. There's no circumstance under which you're going to get penalized for flagging that to us. I mean, your workforce works in the middle of risk. You guys know it, ladies know it better than we do. If something doesn't look right, even if it could potentially impact your own budget, you've got to bring it to us. I think that's the sort of business level empowerment that can save a company a lot of trouble.
You create the right culture and that'll happen. And, people always ask me, well, how do you create the right culture?
Right.
Well, there are a variety of things. But, it starts with education. But also, I've always been a proponent of someone who believes that if you want to really get people on board, as part of their annual evaluations, there has to be criteria there that addresses whether or not someone's compliant with their own program. And guess what? If they're not, then they're not going to get promoted. They're not going to get a raise. Right. And, they're going to understand firsthand then, probably more than any other way, the importance of doing the right thing and being compliant and what compliance really means to the organization. That's how you instill a culture that really, I think, should exist. If you want to ensure that you're not on that front page of the newspaper, And the board especially doesn't want shareholder lawsuits
Sure.
that basically result from the type of breach of what they construe to be fiduciary duties that were not met. This is the right way to do it.
Absolutely. And the survey reported another fascinating finding that almost 50% of the respondents reported that during the initial scoping, risk-relevant issues were either not identified or, Joe, the findings were incorrect. So does this go back to companies are trying to do due diligence light, where they really need a deep dive in some of these places? Like, how could, that's a huge number that you're getting poor information back. What's going on?
Well, first of all, their questionnaires that go out to get that information are probably not as comprehensive as they should be.
Okay.
They're not addressing the relevant issues that should be taken into consideration, whether or not they want to do business with third parties. It's a comprehensive risk assessment and plan that has to be put into place for an organization that'll address all of the variables that could get them into trouble by doing business with the wrong people. For instance, okay, where are we doing business geographically? Okay, what kind of business relationship do we really have with this third party? Is this third party in any way affiliated with a government entity? Is he affiliated with any foreign officials? Does he have or has he ever requested payment to go to a charitable contribution,
Sure.
or a political party? I mean, all of these things play into whether or not you're going to make a final decision to do business with this individual.
Right.
So I cannot believe in this day and age that people don't have a very thorough understanding of what a risk assessment entails, especially in light of 2011, when DOJ came out with 3 very strong opinions and resolutions with Alcatel-Lucent, Maxwell Technologies, and Tyson Foods, where it was so clearly articulated what the best practices would be for conducting risk assessments. If you look at those 3 decisions and you look at the resolutions, it's as clear as a bell that this is what is expected, do it, and we believe if you do it, you will have conducted the type of risk assessment that will keep you out of trouble.
Right. So how are these third parties, how are they trying to get around it? Right? How are, even for a robust and well-intentioned program and due diligence process?
Well, they lie on their questionnaire. Let's start with that.
Okay.
Or they later become affiliated with government officials and don't disclose it. They will ask for advanced pay schemes that they know they shouldn't be entitled to. They'll sometimes even bring in another third party who, basically they say we have to do business with and I want to be associated with and be partners with on this particular deal. All of that plays into it too. Third parties will take advantage of situations if they don't feel that you have the proper controls in place to enjoin bad conduct. It's just that simple.
So does auditing your third parties solve a lot of this problem?
Absolutely, and if it's not a prerequisite to consummating the contractual arrangement, there's something very wrong with that. You should always have the right to audit, but more importantly, you need to exercise it.
Okay.
more than not exercising. Because the fact of the matter is, it's nice to be in a contractual arrangement, but if the third party doesn't believe you're going to actually take advantage of it, what good is it? So yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have internal audit and finance and compliance all jointly, basically conduct those type of audits periodically, and make sure absolutely certain that the third party knows that they're going to be continuously scrutinized very, very meticulously to ensure that they're doing the right thing.
Okay. And going back to the interval monitoring concept, I talked about regime change as impacting it. Any sort of, for folks watching today, any other sort of issues that they should start thinking about as having an automatic trigger, even if it's not a time sequenced process?
Well, look, I think the only way to do it properly is to do it continuously.
By risk ranking in terms of the frequency?
Exactly.
Okay.
You have to do a continuous risk ranking. And you have to, more importantly, update the enhanced due diligence when necessary on third parties that fall into the high-risk category. By the way, I mean, I probably understated the fact that it's not just high-risk third parties now that I'm seeing. I mean, some that fall into the medium, the medium category are also being given enhanced due diligence more and more, because people will feel that I want to have a comfort level that I can say that even though this person didn't rise to a high risk, it was a pretty close score. And I don't feel that great about not conducting the enhanced due diligence that's necessary. Recently, there was a situation where a medium, it was high, medium, and low, and this individual fell into the medium. They did an enhanced due diligence on him just on a hunch, and found out that the person wasn't in the field, didn't even have a business address, and basically had never done any of the type of work that he was representing he did. So, I mean, it's that type of due diligence that's going to basically save you a lot of aggravation down the road.
And that was on a hunch.
On a hunch.
And that goes back to sometimes the best due diligence asset you have is your instinct and saying,
Absolutely.
you know what, this doesn't really look right.
Absolutely. And that coupled with obviously recognition of red flags.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's a good point as far as the risk ranking. So I conspired to bribe a Dutch police officer. And as I often share, the Dutch police probably didn't make anybody's risk rank of late, but it shows, Joe, that there's no such place as no risk.
That's true.
Right?
Absolutely. And if you think there is, that's where you're going to find the greatest problems.
Absolutely.
Guarantee it.
Terrific. Well, it's an important issue, and thanks for spending some time.
It's my pleasure.
To visit, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Always good seeing you, Richard.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.